Hello, my name is Chloe, and for my case, I had case study number 4, which was the geological engineer. So on slide 1, that's just my title slide, and then next I just have an overview of kind of what I'm going to go through. I'm going to look over the problem, point out the 2 different points that could be causing the leak. I also have a little illustration, and then I studied the Geological Society of America, which has an ethical code that this geological engineer would have been held up to. Then I'm going to do my ethical theory evaluation, some objections, and then we're going to wrap it up. So a brief overview is that in the 1980s there was an elementary school and they ended up having to evacuate it, and there were like 400 students that had to be evacuated because they found a gas leak. And they moved the kids to different classrooms for, I think it was about a whole year, after the fire department discovered that the levels in the groundwater were just too high for them to be there, and it was really unsafe. So that was the problem. And then there was an issue because there were 2 places where the leak could have been coming from. So I'm now on slide 4. So it was said that the leak, they originally thought that it had come from this storage tank, which was 600 feet north of the school, and the water table there was 8 feet higher than it was at the elementary school. And the owners of the storage tank had hired this firm that came in and was like, like it could be us, but it could be this gas station. So then they went and looked at this gas station that was 200 feet west of the school, and its water table was elevated 2 feet higher than the school. So on slide 5, I just have a quick little illustration that kind of helps draw that out for you so you can see it. So you can see that the storage tank was above the school, but its water elevation was a lot higher. So there would have been more of a hill, I guess you could say, that it was coming down, if that helps it make sense for you. And then the gas station was on the side of it, and it was closer, but it had a lower water table elevation there. So that's just a picture of that. Okay, now I'm moving to slide 6. So the Geological Society of America is a professional society that is global. It unites earth scientists worldwide. They all have a very similar vision, and they have the same goals and missions, and they ultimately are just trying to discover more about the earth and all work together, and they all uphold these same rules and live sort of by the same things, live and work on the same principles. So a few highlights of their ethical code is that they agree to uphold responsibilities to comply with the code, to do their best to cooperate when they're asked to participate in investigations. That was one thing that definitely stood out and was relevant to my case specifically. They're also agreeing to avoid bias, follow accepted practices in their field, and they are supposed to give full credit when it's due wherever for whatever ideas, creativity, information, things of that nature. And they also agree to uphold their responsibility to conduct proper research to avoid falsification, fabrication, and plagiarism there. So these are all kind of, very similar basic things that you would see across other ethical codes, but the Geological Society of America is someone that this specific engineer could have been reporting to and working under at the time that this case happened. So that is that. And then slide 7 is just a little cutesy slide. Who's at fault? So under deontological ethics, that is the theory that I chose to use. So the ethical premises of this theory is that deontology uses rules to distinguish right from wrong, and the focus is on the process, not necessarily the results. So I thought that was important to my case to look how deontology is very structured and how they would get to the result of this investigation so that they would have a proper investigation. So for the context of this, the geological engineer was hired by the state to pinpoint the leaking point because there had been, some, not necessarily some confusion, but the company that owned the storage tank wanted it to be investigated again. So he did that, and he also conducted a thorough investigation. So kind of coming out to our immediate intermediate conclusion. According to the ethical code that had been laid out by the Geological Society of America, he did take proper responsibilities in conducting this investigation to the best of his abilities, and he followed through everything else they asked of him. So in concluding, this engineer did complete an ethical investigation according to the rules followed under the theory of deontology. So now I'm going to move to slide 9. Some possible objections to the conclusion of this case could be that someone could argue that the conclusion that he had a fair investigation by pointing out that he'd already looked over some investigations and analysis of the situation and had agreed with conclusions that others had come to, that his colleagues had come to before he started his own investigation. And this could imply that he had some bias and tainted the decision of his analysis. So some could say that that would make this an unethical investigation. And another objection could be that some would point out that he used assumptions instead of actually investigating the actual conditions. However, these assumptions were based off of the real-world conditions, and they really didn't alter the result of the case and its decision. So this still, even though he used the assumptions, still led to an ethical investigation. And then my references are on slide 10, and that is the case of the geological engineer.